The salty air whipped at Sean's face as the Intrepid sailed into New Bedford Harbor. After 6 long months at sea, the cobblestone streets and gaslights of his hometown seemed both familiar and strange. He had left as a boy, eager for adventure. He returned a man, forever changed by his experience. His first whaling voyage was over. It was September 19th, 1894. Sean had signed on with the Intrepid alongside his friend Thomas Christian. Thomas's uncle, Captain Christian, had reluctantly agreed to take them both on. The work was hard, the days long. Sean quickly learned the harsh realities of life aboard a whaling ship. The thrill of the hunt was often overshadowed by the brutal task of harvesting the whales. Sean found himself questioning his decision to leave home. He missed his mother and sister. He missed the comfort of his own bed. He missed the familiar rhythm of life on land. As the ship docked, Sean felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. He was glad to be home, but what awaited him? What would the future hold? His journey was far from over. The familiar streets of New Bedford welcomed Sean home. He walked with a newfound confidence, his sea legs adjusting to the feel of solid ground beneath his feet. He thought of his mother and sister. How would they react to the changes in him? He stopped in front of his home, a 2-story building painted white with black shutters. His mother's flower boxes, overflowing with colorful blooms, adorned the windows. A wave of nostalgia washed over him. He knocked on the door, a formality he had never observed before. The door swung open, revealing his sister's smiling face. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Well," she exclaimed, "you made it back alive!" She pulled him into a hug, her laughter echoing in the hallway. "Mom!" she called out, her voice filled with excitement. "Sean is home!" Sean's mother appeared, her dark eyes filled with a mixture of relief and concern. "Oh, Sean, it seems like it's been forever," she said, embracing him tightly. "Damn it, Sean, you are awfully thin. I guess they don't feed you much on that boat." Sean chuckled. "It's a ship, Mom." His sister laughed, shaking her head at their familiar banter. "Your room is still here as it was," his mother said, her voice softening. "Go and put your stuff away, get cleaned up, and I'll feed you." Sean hurried upstairs, eager for the comfort of a hot meal in his own bed. Sean stood in the doorway of his old room. It was as if he had never left. His bed was neatly made. His books were stacked on the shelf. A wave of exhaustion washed over him. He longed to collapse on the bed and sleep for a week, but his stomach growled, reminding him of his hunger. He had become accustomed to the meager rations aboard the Intrepid. The food was bland, often rotten. He had lost weight, his body lean and wiry from the constant work. He had signed on to the Intrepid seeking adventure, eager to prove himself a man. What he found was grueling labor and the stench of whale blubber. He had witnessed the majesty of the creatures firsthand. He had also seen their bloody demise. He had learned to navigate by the stars, to handle the ropes, to scrub the decks until they gleamed. He had even harpooned a whale himself, the memory of its death throes still vivid in his mind. He wasn't sure he was cut out for this life. The familiar aroma of his mother's cooking wafted up the stairs, drawing him from his thoughts. He quickly washed the grime of the sea from his skin and changed into clean clothes. His mother had placed a new pair of shoes beside his bed, the brown suede ones he had admired in town. He sat down at the kitchen table, his stomach rumbling in anticipation. His mother placed a steaming plate of food before him: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy, and his favorite peas. He ate with gusto, savoring each bite. His mother watched him, her expression a mixture of concern and affection. She asked about his trip, her eyes widening at his tales of storms and whales. He downplayed the hardships, not wanting to worry her. He told her about the camaraderie of the crew, the thrill of the hunt, the vastness of the ocean. He avoided mentioning the dangers, the stench, the loneliness. He wanted to preserve her image of him as a brave adventurer. As Sean finished his meal, his mother cleared the table. He knew she had questions, concerns she was hesitant to voice. He braced himself for the inevitable interrogation. He knew she disapproved of his choice to go to sea. "So," she began, her voice tentative, "what are your plans now? Will you be going out on another voyage?" Sean hesitated, choosing his words carefully. He explained that the Intrepid was going into dry dock for repairs. He told her about the potential job offer in Gloucester. a year-long voyage on a larger ship. He avoided her gaze, dreading her reaction. "A year?" she exclaimed, her voice sharp with alarm. "Sean, that's too long. It's too dangerous." Sean tried to reason with her, arguing that he needed to work, that this was his chance to make something of himself. "There are other jobs," she insisted. "Jobs that won't take you away from home for so long. Jobs that won't put your life at risk." Her voice cracked with emotion. Sean sighed, knowing he would never win this argument. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floor of Sean's bedroom. He had tried to sleep, to escape the turmoil of his thoughts, but his dreams were haunted by the rolling waves and the ghostly cries of whales. He tossed and turned, his mind replaying the events of the past few days. He knew his mother was right to worry. The sea was a harsh mistress, unforgiving and unpredictable. He had seen firsthand the dangers that lurked beneath its surface, the storms that could rise up in an instant and swallow a ship whole. But he had also tasted the freedom of life at sea, the thrill of adventure, the camaraderie of his shipmates. He had faced his fears and proven himself capable. He wasn't sure he was ready to give that up. He thought of Tom, of his easy confidence and his unwavering belief in their shared destiny as whalers. Tom seemed to have no doubts, no second thoughts. He was born to this life, just like his father and his grandfather before him. Sean envied his certainty. The sound of the church bell tolling the Angelus echoed through the streets, rousing Sean from his thoughts. He got up and went to the window, gazing out at the familiar scene. People hurried along the sidewalks, their faces etched with the cares of the day. Children chased each other down the street, their laughter carried on the breeze. He thought of his father, of his quiet strength and his unwavering belief in his son. His father had never pressured him to follow in his footsteps, but Sean knew he had hoped he would choose a different path. He wished his father was here now to offer guidance and support. He knew he couldn't stay here, trapped in this small town with its limited opportunities. He couldn't bear the thought of working in one of the stifling factories, his life slowly draining away with each passing day. He had to make a choice. He could stay and try to please his mother, to live a safe and predictable life, or he could follow his heart, embrace the uncertainty of the sea, and forge his own destiny. He knew what he had to do. The aroma of roasting chicken filled the house, a comforting and familiar scent. Sean went downstairs, his stomach growling in anticipation. His mother was putting the finishing touches on their meal, her face illuminated by the warm glow of the stove. She looked up as he entered the kitchen, her expression a mixture of hope and resignation. She knew him too well. She had seen the look in his eyes, the same look his father used to get when he had made up his mind. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the clinking of silverware against china. Sean knew he couldn't put it off any longer. He had to tell her. He took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice raspy with emotion. "Mom," he said, "I've made a decision." His mother's hand trembled slightly as she set down her fork. "I'm going to take that job in Gloucester." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't try to argue with him. She knew it was no use. He was his father's son, after all. That night, Sean found himself drawn to the familiar warmth of the local pub. He needed to get out of the house, to escape the weight of his mother's disappointment. He needed the company of his friend, Tom. The pub was crowded, filled with the murmur of voices and the clinking of glasses. The air was thick with the smell of stale beer and tobacco smoke. Sean spotted Tom at a table in the corner, a tankard of ale in his hand. Tom grinned as Sean approached, his face flushed with drink. "There you are, lad," he boomed, slapping Sean on the back. "I was wondering when you'd show your face around here." Sean took a seat opposite his friend, relieved to be away from the oppressive silence of his home. He signaled to the barkeep for a drink, his eyes adjusting to the dim lighting. The pub was a welcome escape, a place where he could forget his troubles for a while. As the evening wore on, Sean and Tom talked of their plans for the future. Tom was adamant that they should ship out together on the Gloucester whaler. He spoke of the riches they would find, the adventures they would have. Sean listened with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He knew his mother would never approve. He also knew that Tom, for all his bravado, was just as uncertain about the future as he was. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a stranger, a well-dressed man with sharp eyes and a confident air. He introduced himself as Mr. Sullivan, and he had a proposition for Tom. He was looking for reliable men to work for him, men who were willing to take risks. Tom's eyes gleamed with interest, but Sean felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard whispers of Mr. Sullivan, whispers of gambling dens and other illicit activities. This was not the kind of opportunity he wanted. Mr. Sullivan leaned in close to Tom, his voice a low murmur. "I hear you're a hard worker, Tom," he said, "a man who's not afraid of a little danger. I can offer you a chance to make some real money, more than you could ever dream of on a whaling ship." Tom's gaze darted from Mr. Sullivan to Sean and back again. He was tempted, Sean could see it in his eyes, but Sean knew that this path led only to trouble. He had to make Tom see reason. "Don't be a fool, Tom," Sean said, his voice low but firm. "This is madness. This Sullivan character is bad news. We should stick to what we know." To the sea, Tom hesitated, torn between his loyalty to Sean and the lure of easy money. Sean pressed his advantage, reminding Tom of his family, of their expectations, of the dangers of getting mixed up with the likes of Mr. Sullivan. For a moment, the air crackled with tension. Then slowly, Tom shook his head. "You're right, Sean," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I don't know what I was thinking." Monday morning arrived with the relentless certainty of the tide. Sean's stomach churned with a mixture of anticipation and dread. He had a decision to make, one that would shape the course of his life. He met Tom at the appointed hour, and together they climbed the stairs to Captain Christian's office. The office was small and sparsely furnished, dominated by a large desk piled high with charts and ledgers. The air was thick with the smell of salt and tobacco, a familiar scent that evoked both the allure and the danger of the sea. Captain Christian sat behind his desk, his face a weathered mask of authority. He was a man of few words, his silence more intimidating than any outburst of anger. He looked at Sean, his gaze piercing and shrewd. "So, Sean," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind, "I hear you're thinking of shipping out again. A year-long voyage to the North Atlantic. A dangerous proposition for a young man." Sean shifted uncomfortably in his chair, acutely aware of Tom's presence beside him. He knew that Tom's future was secure. He would inherit his uncle's ship, his family's legacy. Sean had no such safety net. He had to make his own way in the world. "Yes, sir," Sean replied, his voice firm despite his nerves. "I've been offered a berth on a whaler out of Gloucester. They're hunting right whales, sir. A dangerous quarry, but the pay is good." Captain Christian leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. He studied Sean for a long moment, as if weighing his words carefully. Sean met his gaze, refusing to flinch. He had made his decision. He would not be deterred. "Your father was a good man, Sean," Captain Christian said at last, his voice softening slightly. "A brave man. But he was a fool to choose the sea. It's a hard life, a lonely life, and it's no place for a man with dreams of home and family." Sean's heart ached at the mention of his father. He knew his mother had hoped he would follow a different path, one that didn't lead him away from home for months, even years at a time. But the sea called to him, just as it had called to his father and his grandfather before him. "I understand, sir," Sean said, his voice respectful but firm. "But the sea is all I know. It's in my blood, sir. I can't imagine doing anything else." Captain Christian sighed, a sound of weary resignation. "Then you're a fool, just like your father," he said, shaking his head. "But you're a good sailor, Sean. I'll give you that. And you've got guts. You'll need them both where you're going." Captain Christian reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small leather pouch. He tossed it to Sean, who caught it reflexively. "Your pay, Sean," the captain said. "Don't spend it all in one place." Sean nodded his thanks, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He had his answer. He had his path. He was going back to sea. Dinner that night was a somber affair. The aroma of roast chicken, usually so enticing, hung heavy in the air, doing little to mask the tension that crackled between Sean and his mother. His sister Mary sensed the unease and ate her meal in subdued silence. Sean could feel his mother's eyes on him, her gaze filled with a mixture of sadness and resignation. He knew he couldn't avoid the inevitable confrontation any longer. He had made his decision, and now he had to tell her. "Mom," he began, his voice raspy with emotion. "I need to talk to you about something." His mother set down her fork, the clinking of silverware against china echoing in the sudden silence. "I know, Sean," she said, her voice soft and steady. "We're going back to sea." Sean looked up, surprised by her words. "I saw it in your eyes this morning," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "The same look your father used to get when he had made up his mind." A wave of guilt washed over Sean. He had hoped to spare his mother this pain, to shield her from the worry and fear that gnawed at his own heart. But he had underestimated her strength, her deep understanding of her son. "I've been thinking, Sean," his mother said, her voice trembling slightly. "There's someone I need to write to, someone who might be able to help." Sean frowned, confused. "Help with what?" he asked. "You can't change my mind, Mom. The sea is my calling, just like it was Dad's." His mother shook her head. "I know that, Sean," she said, her voice filled with a mother's unwavering love. "But that doesn't mean you have to face it alone, or that you have to follow the same path as your father." Sean watched as his mother retrieved her writing materials from the drawer of the sideboard. He had never seen her so determined, so resolute. She had a plan, he realized, and he had a feeling it involved more than just words on paper. Days turned into weeks, and still Sean remained at home. The Intrepid was still undergoing repairs, and the Gloucester whaler wasn't due to set sail for another month. Sean tried to be patient, but the waiting was torture. He spent his days wandering the familiar streets of New Bedford, the salty tang of the sea air a constant reminder of his yearning. He avoided the wharves, knowing the sight of the ships would only intensify his restlessness. One evening, as Sean sat with his mother in the parlor, a letter arrived. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, the script bold and authoritative. His mother received the letter with a small, knowing smile. "It's for you, Sean," she said, handing him the letter, from Captain James Callahan. Sean stared at the letter, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never heard of Captain Callahan, but there was something about the name, something about the way his mother smiled, that filled him with a glimmer of hope. Sean's brow furrowed as he carefully opened the letter. It was stiff and crackled softly, the ink a stark black against the creamy paper. The words were unfamiliar, penned in a hand that spoke of discipline and a life lived on the edge of the known world. Captain Callahan? The name echoed in Sean's mind, a whisper from a past he barely remembered. He began to read, his mother's hopeful gaze resting upon him. Each word seemed to hang in the air, thick with unspoken history and a future yet to be written. Captain Callahan's letter spoke of a time long ago, a time when Sean's father and the captain had sailed together, brothers in arms against the fury of the sea. The letter spoke of courage, of loyalty, of dreams forged in the crucible of shared danger, but it also spoke of loss, of the heavy price the sea often demanded of those who dared to challenge its dominion. Sean's father had paid that price, as had countless others who had answered the siren call of the open ocean. As he read, Sean felt a shift within himself, a subtle realignment of his desires. The sea would always hold a powerful allure, but Captain Callahan's words hinted at another path, a path that honored his father's memory without condemning him to the same fate. Sean finished reading the letter, his mind awhirl with a maelstrom of emotions. Captain Callahan's words had stirred something deep within him, awakening a longing for something more than the harsh beauty and unforgiving embrace of the sea. His mother watched him, her expression unreadable. She had poured her hopes and fears into that letter, entrusting them to a stranger from a past that seemed both distant and intimately familiar. "What does it say, Sean?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sean looked up, a slow smile spreading across his face. "He remembers my father," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He remembers the man, not just the sailor. And he's offered me a chance, Mom, a chance to make something of myself here on land." He spoke of Captain Callahan's offer, of a future in law enforcement, a chance to protect others from the dangers that lurked not only at sea, but also in the shadows of their own town. It was a path that both honored his father's legacy and fulfilled his mother's dreams. As Sean spoke, the weight of the past seemed to lift from his shoulders. The sea would always be a part of him, but it no longer held him captive. He was free to chart his own course, to embrace a new horizon filled with hope and the promise of a brighter future.